Okay, welcome to the final two chapters. We're going to go through the PowerPoints in a little bit of depth, and so uh, review these as well as read the chapters and do the quizzes before next week. So we do chapters 13 and 14. And probably spend a little bit more time with chapter 13 than chapter 14. Some of this in chapter 13 you'll recognize as you're working on it or have kind of thought through it as part of your program plan. So let's go. So this is about, all right, McAfee. This is about different types of regular or traditional media versus social media. And traditional media are things like TV, radio, newspapers, that type of stuff. And it's a great way to get your word out about your programs. We've had a number of different things on the radio, actually in all three: radio, TV, newspapers, uh, even online publications, that type of stuff. And every time we get something out there, we get hundreds of calls, which really helps with recruitment. Not all of them are good fits for the program, but you want people to call, then you can figure out how to help them if they do call. So that's traditional media. And then social media is new, informal, and is sometimes manned by professionals, but is oftentimes kind of directly to the people. As y'all know, we all know about social media: blogs, microblogs, podcasts, internet forums, chat rooms, wikis, and also things like uh, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all sorts of different things. Instagram is big now for some nonprofits that have a great visual component too. So you're supposed to use both. The advantage of traditional media is you can reach a lot of people much more quickly if you have one news story, for example, on the Fox Evening News, for example. Hundreds of people call. So this can increase the visibility of the agency. It can be helpful with fundraising. You can show those videos. It's hard to kind of like show your Facebook page to a donor. They don't really care. But if you get a story about a client on traditional media, that can be really helpful for fundraising. And sometimes media relations, if you are dealing with problems, you can address that proactively by telling your side of the story. So those are some of the advantages of traditional media. This is going to be much more formal, and it takes a while to create these relationships. And a lot of times they'll call you and say, "We're doing a story this evening. Do you want to comment, or can we come out and film somebody?" And you either say kind of yes on the spot, or you miss your opportunity. So a lot of times the traditional media, it's about being available when they need you, and you're not necessarily known in advance. So one of the best practices that I always did was to I wanted from each of my staff one client story once a month or at least once a quarter. That way I'd have a stable of 10 to 12 to 20 stories. So anytime someone from traditional media would call and say, "Hey, do we have a client that," instead of saying, "Well, I don't know, let me go check," I would say, "Yeah, I got 20 of these. Let me see which one would be a best fit for what you're trying to do." And client stories are very powerful, especially when used with data as well, both the qualitative and quantitative. We're not going to talk about that. With more new media or social media, it's a little bit more fuzzy, and you can connect directly to talk to people and have dialogue. Sometimes that can go poorly, and so it can kind of be a double-edged sword. You have to do this, but you have to have someone who's adept at managing it. So that's on. There's not a whole lot on social media in terms of best practices, except to say have a millennial who's really good at the stuff, but also gets the bigger picture and knows how to keep your organization out of trouble, but how to engage people. A lot of times, for the floods that just happened I guess about a month ago now, there were big Facebook pages to try to help people. And those ended up being good for a while, then they ended up being really, really bad because they weren't following privacy laws and people's information was out there for everyone to see. So so you got to do both, but this is a very specific area. You could devote a whole class to it. So fundraising, we've talked about several types of funds throughout the semester: individual donations, benefits could be like a gala or a golf tournament or something like that, direct soliciting people. You could write foundation grants, which is the grant that you got for your project that you're doing right now. it can be membership dues if you have a lot of members. So, for example, the YMCA, a large part of their revenue is through membership dues that you pay a monthly fee. And then you could also, other fundraising techniques include government grants, client fee for service, which we talked about since the start, and some others as well. All right, so grants, which you know a little bit about, but it's provided from one party to another. Could be government, could be foundation, could be private, could be corporate. And typically the grant will say, we'll have kind of a general scope of what you're going to do. But a contract is more specific, that one person will pay the other person, then the other person will deliver a very specific service. So, so the contract is going to be much more kind of descriptive. So you can have different types of grants and contract proposals. The most common is a program proposal. You say, I want to run this program. I need $100,000. I've already collected 50, so will you give me 50 more to actually run the program, and let's see what happens by serving clients. But you could also do research proposals where the point of the proposal, you might do some service, but the point of the proposal is to further the body of knowledge. So you might do it in conjunction with a university, for example. It could be training proposals where the outcome is to train your staff so they're better licensed or credentialed or trained to be able to serve more folks, or serve folks in a better way, I should say. They could be planning proposals. Say you want to undertake a big project, but you don't really know what you're doing. You might ask for a grant to do a 6-month planning process to say the outcome is at the end of the 6 months, we'll have a good plan in place, and then we'll be able to go for big money to actually do the program itself. Technical assistance proposal, that will be so you can pay someone to help you put together a plan or a program, or to help you with another part of your business. And then sometimes there's a contract for services where, let's say, an employer might actually pay you to provide mental health counseling to some of their clients. If you all have heard of employee assistance programs, also called EAPs, that's when you'll be contracted. If you work for an organization that has one of these, you might get 6 free counseling sessions. That's because they have a contract with a provider who then contracts with whoever's providing the counseling. We've gone through this, and I think y'all kind of understand that government grants are larger, they have more stipulations, they can be over a longer time frame, whereas foundation grants tend to be a little bit smaller, they're local, so you'll know the people locally. And in foundation grants, they may want to be a little bit more involved in learning with you, and so they'll be going to meetings with you and that type of stuff sometimes. And the business and corporate grants are for more narrow purposes. So how to apply for a grant, and again, this is a whole class, I think, or at least it should be. You identify potential grant sources, you contact them to make sure that what you're thinking and who you are is a good fit for what they are funding. And it's about what they're funding, not about what you want them to be funding. Then you apply for the grant after you've done the pre-application process. And a lot of the grant proposal that you will write, each one will have a specific format that they want you to use and questions they want you to answer. A lot of that stuff is what you're doing in the program plan right now. Not all of it, but the logic model, the budget, the description of the program plan, the organization chart and management structure, all that stuff you're going to have in all your grant proposals, or at least the big ones. So your cover page, table of contents, abstract or summary, or executive summary in some cases. That's the first part of it. Then the narrative section, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals and objectives? The method is the program, like this is the program we're going to run, this evidence-based, and here's how it works. What the evaluation process looks like, which we just spent a lot of time talking about. But it's about, here's how we're going to measure it, and here's when, and here's who's going to do it, that type of stuff. And then the bibliography, or the appendices as well. The budget section we just went over, so I think y'all got that. Credentials to staff, again, this is more about the function of the position, more so than the individual, unless the individual has specific credentials that are important for this. A lot of certifications, if there are specific rules that you have to follow, you have to certify that you're going to follow those rules. Some are laws, others are guidelines or best practices. I do want to say a couple things about cost sharing or matching funds. Sometimes grants will say, all right, we know you have a $100,000 project. We'll give you $90,000, but we want to see a 10% match. So you need to find the other $10,000 so you can run that. And then you have to have a letter pledging that $10,000 that you put in the grant application. That's what allows you to apply for it. That would be 9-to-1 match. Some grants will be 50-50. They'll say, we'll pay for half of it, but we're not going to until you find someone to pay for the other half. And so you'll find United Way will provide the matching funds for that. They'll write a letter saying, yes, we will give $50,000 if you as the funder get the other $50,000. So you get a letter saying that's going to work. So that's what cost sharing and matching funds are about. Indirect costs are going to be your overhead or your management in general. Like I said, we've set it at 10% for what we've done, but that's typically a little bit low. And then agency or institutional endorsements. These are going to be letters of support typically that people will write to say, yes, they've been in business for a long time, we trust them, we're partners with them, and we kind of vouch for them. And those are very helpful. Sometimes you'll get those from organizations, sometimes you'll get them from elected officials, just depends on what you're doing, and yeah, it just depends on what you're doing. So this budget should look pretty familiar. The expenses on the top and the revenue is on the bottom, but it's the same kind of stuff that we've been talking about. This is there's nothing, I mean, I'm trying to think what to say here other than this is a program that's been split into two different parts or two different kind of cost codes, and here's how you might split that up and what you're doing. So the equipment might be $5,000, but the peer counselor is going to use it a lot less than the drug education side. So you would say, well, we're only going to assign about 30% of the cost of the peer counselors, and then the other two, whatever it is, the other 2/3 to the drug education side. So you can take something that has one cost and then break it up depending on the usage or the projected usage. Time and space cost, I told you all this is typically built on a square foot charge per month. You don't have to worry about that too much. Just know that if you've got different offices with different sizes, here's how you might kind of break it out. You don't have to do this for your project, but this is a pretty straightforward way to do it when you're looking at doing that. Post-application phase, sometimes you'll get less than you requested for, and so they'll say, all right, give us another proposal. You asked for $50,000, but we can only give you 25. And then you say, all right, because I want the money. So give us a proposal for what you plan to do at half the funding. Then you have to figure out, well, can we still do this program? Because sometimes you can, other times you really can't in good conscience do it. But sometimes you can say, yeah, we can do it. We're just going to serve half the clients. In other cases, that won't work. So just figuring out what you do to do an amended budget or amended proposal. Amended, let me be clear, sorry. And then when the grant contract runs out, they want to see what is your sustainability plan. So if we fund you for the first 2 years, what are you going to do in years 3 and 4? We want to see that you have a plan, because otherwise we're just giving you money and you're just going to stop the program when we're done, and that's not going to do anybody any good. So what is your sustainability plan? So you'll say, we're going to go to United Way for funds, we're going to apply to other foundations for funds, we're going to look for government grants, we're going to have a fee for service, and all this will lead towards this program being financially sustainable after the duration of the grant. And the truth is, you're going to write more grants. That's what you're going to do most of the time. Okay, so that's chapter 13. 14 will be pretty quick. Stress and time management. This is pretty intuitive, and we all know this stuff, but none of us do it as well as we should, or at least most of us. But it's important. We're not going to go through the gas and that kind of stuff. A lot of burnout has to do with not just big one-time awful events, but little things that happen over and over and over and over and over again. And when your cortisol levels are raised and you get fight or flight, and that's happening every week or every couple of days or every month, at some point you are going to burn out. It's not just when the agency loses a big grant and has to lose half the staff. It could be when your boss keeps giving you unrealistic deadlines and you're working weekends all the time, you're not getting any sleep, and you're snapping at your kids and all that stuff too. So it's helpful to look at the stress process, the problem, which is the stressor, the perception of the problem, which is how we internalize that. And then sometimes there could be physiological problems, which are physical problems, stomach aches, headaches, breakouts, whatever, psychological problems, and then behavioral problems, which are your behaviors or the external manifestation of that stuff as well. And we'll go through the A, B, C, D, E theory of irrational thinking, and how did you change that? But first, a couple of stress management strategies. You all know this stuff, and if you haven't, this deserves some time. But things like positive imagery, deep breathing, progressive relaxation, mindfulness, biofeedback can be very helpful. Exercise is a big one. I know for myself, when I do get up and go to the gym in the morning, I have a much better day, no matter what happens during the day. And if I don't, then I tend to have a pretty crappy day. I don't have a lot of good ideas. I don't have a lot of energy, and people just kind of notice that I'm grumpy all day is because I haven't taken care of myself. Also, when I don't exercise in the morning, I'll more likely to eat a really bad lunch, like I did today with Taco Cabana. And I probably would have had like a salad if I had gone to the gym to work out. I'm sorry, Taco Bell. Not. I don't want to slander Taco Cabana. Social support is also a really big thing. You have people that you can talk to, and not just sometimes you need to vent. Other times it's just helpful to be around people so you're not in your own head all the time. A, B, C, D, E. What is the activating event? The stressor at work. Then the second thing is, what is your belief system? So if things aren't working out very well, you tend to, a lot of people tend to fall into negative self-talk. I can't do anything right. See, what are the consequences? If I start to believe that, then the physical, physiological, behavioral symptoms, that kind of stuff. But once this starts to come in, the thing to do is to start to dispute the irrational beliefs. No, I'm not going to get fired just because I had a bad day with the client. No, I'm not a terrible counselor. Again, this is just a really tough situation. Not everyone succeeds all the time, but there are different ways to do things, and I'll figure it out. And the effect is that it relieves those physical, physiological, psychological, and behavioral symptoms, and you do better. It's not rocket science, but it's hard to do in the moment. It's easy to talk about as a theory, but it's actually it takes a lot of practice. So 7 common stresses. Inadequate work setting if it's not professional, if you have way too much that's going on, that can be, or if it's a distressing, if you're in such a higher, sometimes behaviors can be contagious. And so if you have a lot of really negative people who are working too hard and are just kind of burned out all the time, chances are you're more likely to be that as well, or to get to that place as well. Frequently urgent deadlines, so you set enough cortisol levels every couple of weeks, and the fight or flight is always kicking on, kicking off, and that's just really hard to deal with. Too much work, too little time, distractions, problematic interpersonal relationships. That's a huge one in terms of, if you're going to work and knowing that you're going to see people that you just don't get along with, that can be very, very hard on your body as well as your mind. Role ambiguity. What am I supposed to do? That's why I've always tried to be very clear with you all about what my expectations were. And if your boss isn't being clear about what they expect from you, it's your job to ask them, to say, what do you expect from me? What does success look like? What does a good job look like? What does a great job look like? What's my time frame? We all have bosses who just like to talk a lot, blah, 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 and then you're not sure what you're supposed to do when they're done. So what I always do is at the end of a meeting, I will say, okay, I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Is that right? And you're supposed to do A, B, and C. Is that right? And they'll say, yes, that's right, or no, what I really wanted was this. And that way there's no ambiguity about what you're supposed to be doing. And then sometimes you can often just have a poor match. Time management is incredibly important. Y'all know that. One big part is just to chart everything. One big approach is just to chart everything out, to plan your time. And I do this all the time, where I make list of what I need to get done. I put them in priority order, and I try to think about like what day each thing has to be done, how long I expect it to be taken, so that way I can figure out if I'm on track or not. And some of these things, one leads into the next, leads into the next. Others are completely separate, but it's simple, but it works. Getting control of this is a big one. Getting control of your own behavior. Understanding that when there's a problem in the workplace, sometimes you are contributing to that. In fact, a lot of times you might. So what are you doing that you can stop doing, and what are you doing that's going well that you need to do more of? Because there's going to be both. So it's knowing yourself, knowing who you are, what's your personality, how do you get along with other people, what's your leadership style, do you work well in teams, all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes this is So what I also like to do is if I have a list of different tasks that I have to do, I'll have a one-page sheet about each of them on my desk, and that way I can quickly shift between them. But also know that after about 2 or 3, after about an hour and a half, I need to take a break, get up and walk around, and that's just how I keep from going more crazy. Delegate. Obviously, if you have a team, and you're managing that team, how do you use a supervisor or as a manager make sure that you're not doing all the work, that you've got a team of 5, so everyone needs to be doing 15 to 20% to make this work. How do you force yourself to not do other people's work? Stay. It can be unprofessional to have a whole lot of stuff everywhere. Leave a little. This is one thing that I've learned to do is I try to leave a couple breaks in my day, 15 minutes just to walk around and think about what's going on, and without having a deadline for every single minute, for every single hour, and that's really, really important. You have a lot of breakthroughs that way you're like, oh, I get it now. And if you were just go all the time, you wouldn't have that. You can't have too much time for that, but you can have 10 to 15 minutes throughout the day that little 5-minute breaks that you get up, walk around, kind of think about what you're doing. One thing that a lot of people, this isn't on here, but this is kind of in this section, managing meetings effectively. So always having an agenda, no matter even if it's just an internal meeting, always have an agenda. This helps with expectations too. Managing correspondence. One tip my father-in-law gave me a couple of years back was I spent a lot of time checking emails and responding to them, but my job is an email checker, right? That's just how a lot of people communicate. So he said, treat your electronic mail like you treat your physical mail. Would you wait at the mailbox all day long? I said, no, of course not. He said, well, maybe go check it every half an hour or every hour, but leave Outlook off. And if people really need you, give them your number, but that way people don't expect things from you the second they send it, and you can really focus on bigger projects if you're not just always checking email all the time, or like every time that ding comes up, you start to excessively, or like just rush to type back or whatever. And when people know that about you, they know that they can come see you, they can call you, but if they email you, they're going to get a response in an hour, or at most in an hour, and it's not a big deal, and that'll free up so much of your time, and it does. It frees up a whole lot of time. And then review your weekly, so on your checklist, what did we actually accomplish this week? And be excited about that too. Sometimes like, oh, I wish I got done A, B, and C, but I got done 4 or 5 things, and that's pretty good. Procrastination, y'all know it. We all do it. So one thing that's helpful is to give yourself little deadlines on all the projects. If you have a month to do something, give yourself a deadline every single week of what part of it needs to get done. Chunking it, breaking up the big task into smaller tasks, and it really works. Do the worst part first, so that way it's easier after you're done with that, and that way you're not thinking about it the whole time. And start it now. Don't mess around. And then self-analysis of procrastination in your personal style. All right, so that actually ends the chapters, and I will see y'all very soon. So hope everything's going well.